excited to be able to share these conversations with the Flote audience, wherever you may be right now. We have been thinking long and hard about how to traverse the world as it is today, and there are so many different things happening that are stressful and causing us not to be able to communicate in the best ways. And by the way, I should start by saying my name is Angel and I'm the VP of Marketing at Flote. So I really have been thinking a lot about, what my role is in this and how we can come together and how Flote can be a platform where people really can discuss things. If you look at some of the other big tech companies, there's a lot of censorship, there's a lot of hostility and negativity, and it is very difficult to be yourself, to speak about the things that are important to you, and then beyond. And so I'm excited about the Flote Conversation series because that's what we're trying to do here. We're going to bring together two people every week who are good at conversing, good at listening to other people's ideas, good at being curious about other ideas and discussing their ideas in really meaningful ways, right? Where we're trying to reach consensus, and if not consensus, just understand it, right? So I was really happy to have Howard agree to have this conversation, and Raeford, because Howard, I met you at a conference, and one of the things I love about conferences is that you get together in a room with people and you talk to people, and it's a very different environment than when you talk to people online, right? Even if you're meeting people who are very different from you, the way that you communicate with people when they're sitting right in front of you is very different than the online environment. And the way that the world is today, it's very difficult to get into a room. Have such great technology that allows us to do that. So we definitely want to take advantage of it and then share it with the audience. Having said that, these conversations will be every Monday at 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We will bring together two people who will have a discussion all to themselves, and we will just sit back like flies on the wall and hopefully learn a little bit, watch people engage in a respectful way, and maybe it'll inspire us in some of the conversations, some of the difficult conversations that we are going to have to step into, or that we're having to step into. So with that, I would like to hand it over to Howard and Raeford. I think probably you guys can start by introducing. Do you guys know each other?
We just met.
Met 2 minutes ago. So there we go. A new connection on Flote right here live for everybody.
We have no idea what anyone's going.
Really, what we thought that the police should do is that they should get together and they should draw a thick red line in the sand, and they should say, "Hey, we're not going to enforce victimless crimes, because victimless crimes are crimes where there isn't a victim, where the government says society is the victim, and the politicians frequently try and use the police to enforce rules that are tyrannical or to raise revenue." And we felt the police are being put into this position, and so we want to support the police to be able to lock arms and do this. And as I thought about this, I had seen you speak, and I knew your background, and I couldn't think of anybody else that I wanted to kick this idea around with other than you. And so if you could tell everybody a little bit about yourself, then we can begin to have a conversation.
Yeah. So interesting times with law enforcement and this whole is it martial law? I mean, we're locked down, right?
It is martial law,
and so a lot to talk about and to kind of process. Yeah, so I'm Raeford Davis. I'm a former police officer. I used to be a cop in the city of North Charleston, South Carolina. I've been off the force for a while now. I was there for 2002 to 2007. And North Charleston was considered like the 8th most dangerous city at the time. So it was, we had a lot of murders. We were highly aggressive or proactive, police department. Our job and our mission, get guns and drugs off the streets. And so, I patrolled, high crime areas, the detective division for a couple of years. The reason I got out of policing was I got hit by a truck. I was directing traffic, and just somebody ran off the road and hit me and broke my leg. And that put me out. I was a bit disillusioned, and I was kind of just, troubled, just like a lot of police officers are, with just how we did things. And I was like, man, this isn't quite right, particularly with the drug war and drug enforcement, and just a lot of conflict with, what was legal and in our use of force with what you would call, victimless. How about mala prohibita instead of mala in se crimes? Just kind of social engineering crimes or laws that we enforce, particularly like with marijuana, and compare that to alcohol. And here I was a cop. I shoved guns in people's faces. I drugged them out of their car. I would physically assault them, put handcuffs on them, and put them in jail and destroy their lives over the mere possession, personal use. This is adult consensual activity. Can drug use and like marijuana, can it be harmful? Yeah, it can be harmful, but it's not violence. It's not like you're robbing someone or raping someone or stealing. It's a personal choice, just like alcohol. And is alcohol, if I did the same thing as a cop, if I just this guy is drinking, and me and some friends went and kicked in some stranger's door because he likes to drink a beer on the weekend and threatened to shoot him, or actually shot him or shoot his dog or whatever, all the stuff that we see law enforcement do with the drug war. And it wasn't until I got out of policing that I could really see just how wrong that is, just on a basic, fundamental moral principle, to resort to use force against what you would call like a victimless type crime with these drug laws. And I think we see the same today going on with these lockdowns and mass laws. Is what we have the same thing. And particularly like with the drug war, the United States, us as cops, we arrested and incarcerated our own citizens, and have for decades, at the highest rate of any other country on the planet. Now, I don't think a lot of people understand that. Even cops don't understand that. We arrest more people and incarcerate them than Russia, than Communist China, than North Korea. I mean, and if you look at even like Louisiana, states with the highest incarceration rates, their rates equal East Germany in the 1970s. And so just a huge miscarriage of justice, and how we actually caused more harm to the community in enforcing these victimless crime laws. Sure, drugs, have all these problems. Well, you have thefts and robberies and murders and assaults and everything. Mm-hmm. No, that's all based on, that's a result of the prohibition. So just like we learned with alcohol, we had alcohol prohibition. The mobsters and all the crime and violence that went along with that was totally the illegal market that we created, the black market that naturally evolved due to the criminalization that we enforced. So that's where cops, and I saw it, the harder we would push with the drug enforcement and the tougher we would get, in a lot of ways, the worse things would get. And just one real quick example. If you arrest someone, just a normal guy that like sells drugs or use drugs or something like that, and you catch him and you get him off the street, the guy who you leave on the street, it's the more violent guy. That's who naturally progresses and rises up the food chain. It's the guy who nobody will snitch on because he will shoot them or he will shoot up their house. If you don't pay him, he will come shoot you. That's the total psychopath guy. That's who rises up, El Chapo or whatever. That's who ends up running the drug trade. And of course, we saw that, with alcohol prohibition, with Al Capone and those guys. It's the worst that rise to the top. And that's just a basic, human and natural reaction to the prohibition, not necessarily the drugs themselves. And so that's why it wasn't until I got out of policing that I was able to really look back and just see how, no matter how well-intended we were, that particularly with drug enforcement and these victimless type crime laws, a lot of traffic enforcement and code enforcement and these things are long-term counterproductive to our goals. We're good guys. We want to help our community. We want the violence to go down. The harder we fought, kind of the worse it would get. And
so Raeford, right now, man, I think there's a whole lot of people that their jaw has fallen out of their face and it's on the ground. It's bounced a couple of times and they've, been able to oh my God, I've never heard a police officer, an ex-police officer, say anything publicly on any kind of airwave, CNN, Fox News, whatever, questioning the morality or the legality or the criminality of what they're doing. And so I wanted to just kind of take a step back for the audience and just kind of talk a little bit about, what is a victimless crime and what separates it from a real crime. And when I say a real crime in the kind of the natural law tradition, which has a 1,000-year history of kind of jurisprudence, if we compare that versus what I like to call man's law or politician scribbles, natural law says that there are 5 to 7 real crimes, and a real crime is a crime where there's a perpetrator and a victim. And so murder, rape, assault, robbery, theft, extortion, these are all obviously real crimes. When the police intervene in these issues, people have no problem with the police. We welcome the police protecting us from people that would victimize us in society, would steal our stuff, would hurt us. And if the police only acted in those ways, then I think law enforcement would be a way more honorable profession. But it's only really when the police interact to enforce man's laws, politician scribbles, where politicians use the law to make things that are not crimes so they can either raise revenue or try and socially engineer society. You mentioned drug abuse, but I'd like to give you the audience a couple more examples. Gambling is
all the vices.
All the vices, and in gambling, I just moved to New Hampshire, part of the Free State Project, but I used to live in Northern Virginia, and Raeford, in Northern Virginia, there was a high stakes poker game. Wealthy businessmen, I think it was like a $20,000 buy-in, and it was kind of well known in Northern Virginia, or the word got out because they would have kind of the guys from the World Series of Poker, come and play in the game, and it was all honest and above board. They were just businessmen, that like to play poker. And so the Fairfax County SWAT team got heard about it. And so they're having a game one day. The Fairfax County SWAT team kicks in the door, guns drawn, pointed at their heads, and then robs all of the players and keeps 40% under asset forfeiture. And this is just a couple of years after the Fairfax Police Department and the Fairfax SWAT team had set up a Fairfax County police detective had befriended a local optometrist with no history of criminal activity, no previous arrests for anything like that. Met him in a bar. they started talking about football, and the Fairfax detective got him to begin betting on football games, and waited until he got the total amount of bets hit $2,000, I think, which was the limit where they could, arrest him on some,
make it a felony charge,
make a felony charge on it instead of a misdemeanor. And so the Fairfax SWAT team rolls up. The guy walks out to pay the detective in his slippers and his pajamas. And the first Fairfax SWAT team officer out of the SUV accidentally discharges his gun and kills the optometrist, who was a father and a husband, over football bets. And so these are the kind of things that people may or may not understand, that the police are using the violence of the state to force compliance. But these are generally the things that get the population mad at the police, because the enforcement requires the police to entrap people, and it forces them to do no-knock raids and SWAT teams, and there's like 60,000 plus no-knock raids a year. Is there anything that I forgot to mention about victimless crimes? And what do the average cop think about victimless crimes versus real crimes, or do they?
Well, if you wouldn't break the law, we wouldn't have this problem. So that's on you. And I don't make the laws. I just enforce them. So why are you blaming me? You blame the politicians. And, well, this guy got killed, and that's unfortunate. If you don't like the law, you should try to change it. Don't blame me. Which is interesting. What I always thought is interesting is cops, anything that law enforcement claims they do that they're being forced to do by politicians, they will say, this absolves me. You can't impugn my character, or policing don't knock or anything negative against policing for this instance where we enforce drug laws or whatever, because we're just following orders. We're just following orders. However, whenever they do anything supposedly good, hey, I've arrested this person, or we broke this ring, or we did this or did that, or they will say, well, that's give praise to the cops. Mm-hmm. And so, well, on 1 minute, well, aren't you just following orders? Why should you get any praise for doing? You're just a robot. Mm-hmm. And so, they want it both ways. And just you look at that, and so in your situation where a guy is killed, just totally senselessly and needlessly. You have a cop that's now a killer, that's murdered someone, absolutely murdered someone. Maybe irrevocably. And I don't want cops being put in that position. Why are we doing that? And why are cops allowing ourselves to be put in that position where we could harm our fellow neighbor optometrist, where we end up shooting them over, the stupid, we do the basketball playoff sheet that everybody does, and they're at work doing the same thing. So, and now, while someone getting killed, that's very rare for a law enforcement to kill people. It does happen. It is very rare. And then sometimes does kind of distract from just the daily humdrum destruction that law enforcement can cause enforcing these victimless crimes. Now, before I go any further, there are real crimes, like we said. There is rape, there is robbery, there is murder, there's theft and fraud and all kinds of horrible things that people do to each other. And cops do a good job at times, and honorable and dangerous, and put their life on the line in order to protect, people of the community. Even cops who get on, risk their life to save and protect absolute strangers. Not so much for their pay, but just because they think that's the right thing to do. But look, just break down what you talked about with that instance. And so here it is. They're just gambling. And you say, well, gambling can be Is it victimless? Yeah. Can it be harmful? Gambling can be a problem. That can cause problems. But
Taco Bell can be a problem.
Yeah. And
but is it violence? Are those people gambling? Are they using force, threatening force, coercion? Are they acting in a fraud, running a money pyramid scheme or something like that? No, they're legitimate gambling. Everybody knows exactly what the stakes are, and they are adults. There's not 12-year-old kids that people are playing poker with and stealing their money. These are adults. And they're doing it, in a business, privacy of the home. They're not doing it sitting down in the middle of the road doing it. They're doing it on their own property. So why should law enforcement have any interaction with that whatsoever? We shouldn't have any. And then you see even the cops, they worked it. They actually made it more, we've got a real crime. So they actually tried to work it up to a felony. So now you have the cops actually, it's not entrapment, encouraging, enticing. It's entrapment.
That doesn't meet the definition of entrapment. And I don't know what could have met the definition.
Yeah,
of
nothing will, because, who writes the rules? The law enforcement and the government, so they absolve themselves.
So
it wasn't
let's talk. I tell you what, let's talk about that, because that's interesting. So you brought up a real interesting point, and that point is that when the cops get confronted, they say, "Hey, we don't make the laws." But obviously, law enforcement must understand that there are bad laws. So if you look back in history and you ask people about, the laws of Nazi Germany or Jim Crow laws or fugitive slave laws, these are obviously bad laws. So you can't, as a police officer, you absolutely cannot use as a yardstick. So what does that, where does the average police officer draw his line in the sand today? And where do you think the line ought to be drawn? We think that it ought to be drawn no victim, no crime. And we think that would kind of solve all of these issues of the police raising revenue on their friends and neighbors. And we want to support the police to say no to the politicians. But, where do the cops draw the line today? And where do you think it ought to be drawn?
Well, cops, just like our entire population, is taught to draw the line by whatever they're told by media and their legislators. So we are totally inculcated into that. And so are we really able to step back from ourselves and say, so this law, is there a higher authority? Is there a natural order to things or something? How do we judge this law to say whether it's moral or immoral, or if it's right or wrong? Just these kind of basic principles. When do you ask? When do you ask that? What do you ask? Cops don't. They'll be a little troubled or this and that, but they'll go, well, what do the courts say?
Right.
And they'll go, well, the Supreme Court says, yes, we can drag people out of their cars for officer safety. And if they flinch, we can shoot them, and we can they go back and say, well, we were trained this way. So we accidentally shot the guy because we were pulling him out of our car because he flashed his high beams at us, which is illegal.
Right.
You see, they just go right down that hole, and it's kind of a kind of just self-perpetuating system to where you're kind of logically stuck. So for Jim Crow or the black codes or slavery or forced sterilization of all these laws that we would say, oh, that's absurd, I would never enforce that. It's funny.
Advice would you give sheriffs and chiefs, and what advice would you give aldermen and elected officials?
Well, I think we're coming from that these masks are required, that vaccinations are required, and and what culpability or responsibility do you have if these facts, this so-called science that they're giving us out, this medical science, Dr. Fauci and these guys that are just total goons, Whatever position you're at, these guys are goons, and you're following their orders. Again, politicians, Lindsey Graham, that's my senator. He tells you, hey, you're going to give vaccinations. You're really going to follow that dude's orders? Just kind of. But to politicians and stuff, you got to tell them, hey, this is wrong. This is not right. No matter how legal justifications they give you or how much money they give you to pay for this. Our governor, the very day that he signed our lockdown orders here in South Carolina, he was given $2 billion to pass around through his cabinet, throughout the state. Just how dirty are these orders? And you're going to follow them? I don't know what else to really say to them than that, will you change their mind? Well, you're not. They got to change their own. So you got to provide the evidence. You got to speak out. Being confrontational with cops and just with anybody in general, right now, I think that, again, with this great reset, that conflict they're actually being encouraged. And so I think conflict and open conflict with cops right now is really dangerous and really will have counterproductive effects. And so at this point, and so where we're at right now, so I would not do that. And the cops will hunker down if you really start yelling at them and getting in their face and stuff. They'll just kind of mentally shut down, just like anyone does. Yeah. And so I would be really careful with that. I just, not only for your own sake, because of, this is kind of a dangerous world, and especially what you say and what we put out here on media can get turned around or, get used against you later, type of things.
Yeah, well, I want to be clear. We're on the cop's side. Like I said, I have friends that are in law enforcement, and they don't want to be doing these victimless crimes, and so we're trying to help them. We're trying to support them as the community and say to the, it's the people and the police against the politicians that are forcing the police to act immorally and tyrannically, and we want to support them to be able to say, no to the politicians. And so we're not being adversarial towards the police. We're trying to stop them. I've yet and we're getting close to the end of our conversation. But why don't we provide some resources to your brothers and former brothers in law enforcement? Can you tell people about the Law Enforcement Action Partnership and that because I know right now, and I guarantee you have just absolutely dropped the jaws of so many people that have never ever heard that there are police officers that are against these. Can you tell people just how many police officers and judges and prosecutors and other people in law enforcement that are 100% against these and are working to put an end to it?
Okay, first of all, how you just said it. Hey, we want to support these cops because we don't, we want to help you because we don't want you put in these positions where you're going to be enforcing these laws that, are just really problematic. And you've said it better than really I could. That's where we're talking, want to talk to these cops is, we want you to be the good guys. This is really dangerous territory, unprecedented. And are you sure you're the good guy? I mean, when you're enforcing these laws, you may not be. And so, we want to help you and help, give you a voice, because cops, they do feel powerless. I know people go, cops, they can do whatever they want and everything, but they do they do in a lot of ways feel powerless and feel under attack. And so if you can come at them in the position that you're at, and like I said, there's really good guys that want to help and serve the community. So go from that way. LEAP, Law Enforcement Action Partnership. So, we've been, saying for years, let's legalize all drugs. because we got to end the drug war, because the drug war is actually more harmful than the drugs themselves. And we've had 40 years, nearly 50 years, 100 years, however you want to count it, of results to show that the drug war is a horrible disaster. And it has been terrible for law enforcement. I mean, officers, like you said, have killed or killed other people in these useless drug SWAT raids and everything else. And we don't want to have another, vaccine war or whatever, a virus war. This is crazy. We don't need cops in this position. And so, and it took me a long time. So you say your jaw dropped, when I was talking about legalize all drugs, how hard of a process that is. I mean, for someone to go, it took me several years and very difficult on the ego to kind of go through that process. And cops and everything, I consider myself a libertarian before I became a cop. Yeah. And so, they're all kind of on that spectrum. And so you got to, kind of work with them and kind of bring them along. So we have thousands of police officers, particularly talking about the drug war, and then LEAP has kind of expanded into a lot more just kind of, police abuse and just counterproductive, policing and law enforcement activities to make our communities safer. And so, we have, a couple thousand members here on LEAP now.
Thousands.
Yeah.
Thousands.
Yeah.
I want everybody to think about that, about how many people, how many that represents. And that's amazing. I wanted to just thank you, Raeford. You're one of the most courageous members of law enforcement that I've ever met. And I want to thank you for having the courage to speak out. I mean, I know that, what you must have faced to do that, but I salute you. And I wish there were more law enforcement officers that would do exactly what you're doing, and we wouldn't have these issues right now if there was.
Well, thank you. And you know what? Even when I talk to law enforcement, I'm hard on them sometimes. I've never had any kind of retaliation or anything like that. So there you go. I know I was so scared to speak out, and maybe today I'm a little worried than I have been before in the past about speaking out. But have a duty to do so. And like I said, I haven't had any retribution. So if there's other people out here in the law enforcement community, hey, look, if you can jump out of your car and go up to an armed robbery call, if you have the nerve to do that, hey, I may get shot, but I've got to go run to that call and I've got to go run to that danger. Well, then at least you can get on Jitsi and talk to some people about some problems that would make our community safer, and you shouldn't fear that at all.
Absolutely. I do want to chime in, because one of the things that you said that kind of struck a chord with me is this idea of police feeling disempowered, and it's kind of counterintuitive to think about it like that, but they are in these positions where they have roles and they should be serving the people, and then there's this idea of the people having control of the government. So it's really difficult when there seems to be some sort of chasm between what the government is, what the legislature is telling these officers to do.
And they get that from the community too, so they're getting pulled very hard. And we've seen this with a lot of the Black Lives Matter protests and everything, where we have the same communities will be screaming for them. You need to come protect us. You need to come into our communities and help us because we're struggling. And then when they do, of course, the cops do cop things. Then they get screamed at for being there.
Right.
And the cops, they don't understand the dichotomy, or they're trying to do their best. And of course, and I know even my department, we had pretty good cops there that really wanted to do the good thing, and good leadership that was responsive to the community. And we still had these horrible problems. So you imagine police departments like maybe Minneapolis or others or Baltimore that are worse. I mean, well, that's why they have the problems. So the cops are being pulled very hard, and they do feel like they're under attack. A lot of it's justified. Maybe they should look into themselves and see why. And so we have these conversations.
Yeah, I think that when people are disempowered, that's when we really start to see some of that frustration come out, and it can explain a lot of what's happening in those communities when you have police who aren't feeling like they have the power to act and are being pulled in different directions. And that's
Yes.
why I like what the thick red line is all about. It's
Yes.
the idea that, like, let's reach out to them. Let's provide some community that supports, but that also asks, right? So building those connections so we can move forward together, which is the message I really think is important right now, because we can't be at odds and we can't be vilifying each other, because that is going to lead in one direction. But we have an opportunity with programs like the Thick Red Line and LEAP to come together with as many people as will come together and start to build something new. And I don't think we need to bring everybody along at the same time, but if we can start to build some connections and some communities and show others how it's done and how we can have those small wins, then I think there's that ripple out effect. So I really appreciate the way that you guys are both in, like with your respective programs, trying to make those connections, as difficult as it is sometimes. We know that it is, but Godspeed, I wanna ask you guys a question. And this is sort of off topic. We're gonna hard left, but right now in the world, communication is so, again, hostile a lot of the times, makes it difficult for us to come together. With Flote, we're trying to create an environment where we can come together. That, a platform can only do so much, but I want to know what you guys think about what Flote can do, or what Flote is doing in order to, change the conversation, or just even allow the conversation.
Well, let me kick that in, because I've been very critical about the amount of censorship that is openly going on Facebook, on Google, on YouTube, on Twitter, and it seems to me that all of these platforms have government involvement from the beginning. Many people know that Facebook appears to be a DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Program Association program called LifeLog. Google, there's an excellent article called How the CIA Made Google that breaks down the specific programs that Google came out of at DARPA, the Highland Forum, the exact grants that they received, the exact people that worked on it. And so there appears to be a kind of control perception program within the government and the media where these voices are being censored algorithmically. That's what I kind of meant by there's probably a lot of people right now that are absolutely going, I did not know that there were police officers that felt this way. I did not know that there were thousands of them organized into a group called the Law Enforcement Action Partnership. And so the reason that they don't know about this is because they don't allow voluntarism, the idea that you don't need government, that everything the government does could be done better by the free market, by private companies, by real charities, by mutual aid societies, or it shouldn't be done at all, because that's the one voice that is never allowed to be voiced on the mainstream media and is being censored openly on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, Discuss, Meetup, and half a dozen other Snopes, control perception programs. And so so the fact that there are new social media platforms like Flote that are open source and that are saying, hey, we're not going to censor at all, that's what we need. And so I think it's welcome.
Well, that's what helped me was guys, Jack Cole and some of the founders of LEAP, me seeing them and hearing them say radical things that are now in the mainstream. That's what encouraged me to speak out. So hopefully, with people like places like Flote that are more open, that we can hear this and kind of spread some information and change other people's minds, and maybe we can have a kind of change the society in a positive way just from voluntary interactions.
Beautiful. Thank you. We at Flote, we are committed to, again, having open conversations and allowing people to work through their ideas, privately, but also out there in the world where they're coming into contact. It's the edge case where a lot of the magic happens. The meeting of different worlds, and that's how we grow together. And so I find it exciting. I know it's difficult, but I find it exciting that we can come together and talk about different ideas. And I wouldn't want to live in the world because over the course of years, I've changed my own views. My intentions haven't changed, but my views, as I've learned more, as I've been confronted and had some of my beliefs confronted, I've come to better beliefs that I think really serve my intentions, for a better world. And I would not want to live in a world where I might not come into contact with those ideas, either because I'm censoring the world for myself, or because someone else, and even more scary, because someone else is censoring the world for me. So I appreciate that. I appreciate you guys getting out there into the world and continuing to talk about the things that are important to you, such that you are.
All right. Well, it's good talking to you, Howard and Angel. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to have a discussion, and I hope everybody enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Angel. Thank you, Kingsley. Thank you, Flote, for making a free and open platform available for a free and open discussion.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Hang on for a second, Howard.